All right, everyone. Well, welcome to this. We're calling it a family meeting with Senator Tom Cotton today. We're very excited to get going with this. I want to thank those of you that just joined our Big Family membership program. We just launched this week. Very exciting. Almost 3,000 of you signed up just this week. So very exciting. SaveTheFamily.app if you're not in that membership and you'd like to sign up. But we're going to do this family meeting today. We're going to talk with Senator Tom Cotton about some of the most important issues facing this country. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the president of American Principles Project, Terry Schilling.
Hey, thank you so much, John. And thank you all for being here. We got a ton of questions, a ton of things to go through. I just want to say I'm very excited. Senator Tom Cotton has been a real champion for us and for the American family. He's been doing a great job. We're going to go over all of that. But I'm wondering, Senator Cotton, can you just kind of give us a state of play for the country and the Senate? Like, what are the big things going on there? And just kind of give us a rundown of what you're seeing and what you're prioritizing right now.
Well, thanks, Terry, and thank you all for having me, and thanks for the important work of the American Principles Project and the Big Family Initiative. I look around the country and I see a move over the years away from what used to be a defining American trait, which is toleration. Our founding fathers talked about toleration for the views of others, especially for different religious creeds. But the left is no longer content with toleration by any means. They're really not even content with acceptance. I mean, they want to demand celebration on their views about gender and race. They want to force them on the entire country. They want to indoctrinate your kids, whether it's through school or through sports or civic organizations. They want to silence you, impose your views on children at the youngest ages. But one thing that I think is particularly heartening is that parents and families are not taking this line down, especially now that it's been exposed, just how deeply it's spread through our school systems, both public and private across the country. But what you've seen is a lot of very courageous parents standing up and fighting back. I bet all of you have seen some of the same video footage that I've seen at local school board meetings where parents are relentlessly condemning the woke attacks on their kids' innocence and the morale and the patriotism they feel about the country and what parents are trying to teach them at home and in their churches. I think that's incredibly encouraging. Families form the backbone of our country, and they're rising to the challenge, even when most of Washington will not. And our country simply can't thrive and ultimately survive if we allow the left to indoctrinate an entire generation of our kids to hate our country, to teach them radical theories about sex and about race, and to turn them against their families and their country and their religion. Again, that's why I'm so pleased to be speaking with you today and support very much the work of the American Principles Project and the Big Family Initiative. The family is our very first institution, and it's under relentless attack. And we need people like you to stand up and fight back. So I just want to say thank you very much, and I'm very happy to join you today.
Well, and we're happy you're joining us. When we let our members know that you were the first guest as part of this big family meeting thing that we have going for us, everyone was excited. We didn't get any, you were like, oh, you're the first, so you haven't gotten any criticism. That's a pretty good indication that you've been a champion for us. So what we're going to do, we had members send through a ton of questions, and we're just going to go through some of them. This is going to be, like I said before, this is going to be a member-led organization. We want them determining who's joining us on these calls and the questions and topics we're talking about. And one thing that kept coming up in the questions was questions regarding the Equality Act. And you look at the school system, you've got boys and girls sports, that you're teaching little kids that they can change their gender, all this stuff. And there's been a lot of rumors recently that the Equality Act is going to be brought up for a vote here in the Senate. I think it's already passed the House. But Senator, in your mind, can you talk to us about how conservatives can better protect our women and kids from the Equality Act and all the bad things that are going to come from that?
Yeah, well, not surprisingly, as often the case with Democratic legislation, the Equality Act doesn't quite live up to its title. It would make unequal policies the law of the land, especially when it comes to protecting young girls and young women in sports or in their schools, in colleges, and so forth. It's far-reaching, far beyond anything the Democrats have proposed in the past, and it's really just of a piece with the radical gender ideology that the left has been trying to indoctrinate, and rights that we've long respected, that were hard fought for by many people. Protections for women and parental rights in particular are being abandoned in the name of gender ideology, and in some cases they'd be outlawed if the Equality Act were to pass. You see school districts around the country that are deliberately refusing to tell their parents about their child's purported new gender identity and allowing children to socially transition in school without any notification or consent. Again, that would be mandatory if the Equality Act were to pass. A school district in Wisconsin and a school district in Maryland were recently sued for these policies, which would have prohibited employees from telling parents about their kid's gender identity unless the child had given them permission. Again, that would be mandatory if something like the Equality Act. In Washington State, at just 13 years old, minors can receive mental health and gender affirming care, which in practice means puberty blockers, again, without parental permission. And of course, I think you've all seen that women's sports are on the chopping block as well. Just last week, the Department of Education decided to interpret Title VII, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex, to require discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. That is rampant, not just in our country, around the world. You've probably seen the news of the first so-called transgendered female athlete to perform in the upcoming Olympics. Look, there's a reason why we have men and women's sports in the Olympics. Some of us are old enough to remember the 1988 Summer Olympics, where the late, great Florence Griffith Joyner set the women's world record in the 100-meter dash. It still stands to this day in a sport where records fall almost every year. 33 years later, FloJo's record still stands. No woman has ever run faster. You know who has run faster than FloJo? 76 high school boys in America in the last track season, as an indication of just how different the sexes are when it comes to physical and athletic competitions. Now, whatever the Biden administration does, we're going to stop it in the Senate. There's a possibility that we may vote on the Equality Act later this week even. Chuck Schumer hasn't revealed what he's going to do all week long, but after we vote down their attempted takeover of our election system, it wouldn't surprise me if he brings that bill up. We'll stop it here. And in the meantime, I know that many states are fighting back against the radical left, including my own state of Arkansas. Many of them states like Arkansas have adopted a very common sense solution that simply bans biological boys from competing with girls in sports. I've co-sponsored similar legislation at the federal level, and I'll continue to make sure that we don't allow the left to pass the Equality Act and ultimately outlaw what are beliefs and views and really scientific facts going back to the dawn of time.
No, that's exactly right. And I just want to say, just to our members, if you can, there are these incredible videos of Senator Cotton in these hearings in the Senate, and you see him in action, and he's actually like holding these people their feet to the fire. It's something to behold. We'll be sharing some of these videos. I'll find them for you all, and we'll blast them out to you. But before we go on to the next question, I just want to reiterate, Senator Cotton just mentioned that it's very likely that, very possible anyway, that the Equality Act could come up for a vote this week. You guys need to contact your senators and make sure that they know where you stand on this issue. Senators and members of Congress, they are responsive to these calls. They do make a difference. And if we get enough calls to some of these Senate offices, we can maybe possibly keep the bill from coming up for a vote. So make sure you contact your Senate office and let them know that you oppose the Equality Act because of all the disastrous things that Senator Cotton just lined out. Senator, you brought up the legislation that passed in Arkansas, and that's the state legislation when they go to protect our daughters or protect our wives and girls in the states. These corporations come out of nowhere and they stage these economic boycotts and they send out these statements. You saw us in Georgia as well with the election integrity bill. they have this, it's like these corporations have adopted the whole woke agenda of the progressive movement. So I'm wondering if, can you tell us, like, give us some inside scoop, like the lawmakers that you work with in the Senate, are they actually still worried about these corporations and what they can, do from their bully pulpits? And, do they care more about these corporations, I'm wondering, than they do American families?
Well, I don't care about them, and I don't listen to them, in part because, Delta or Coca-Cola, just take a couple examples, who notoriously condemned a Georgia election law that they totally misrepresented, don't take those positions. In fact, those are corporations with tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of employees. And I assure you, there are thousands and thousands of people who work at those companies who view these things exactly the way we do. I can tell you Delta has a lot of them because I see flight attendants and gate agents when I'm going back and forth between home and Washington, and they thank me for speaking out on these issues. But it's the corporate CEOs who have totally failed to stand up to the demands of just a small number of their activist employees and tell them that, we don't take positions on election laws or on school policies. We are here to fly airlines, or we're to sell sugary beverages with zero nutritional content to Americans. It's also very, very disappointing to see so many companies that will condemn a state like Georgia or Arkansas or other states that have passed laws with which the far left agreed or disagreed, at the same time that these companies are celebrating the Chinese Communist Party and desperate to do business with China. Just look at Disney, for instance, threatening a few years back to pull out of Georgia because of a pro-life bill that Georgia passed. While at the same time, they were literally thanking the provincial government in Xinjiang province in Western China, where a genocide is happening against millions of ethnic and religious minorities. I would say, though, that there is something that we all can do. Remember, this is not a majority speaking. It's a very small but very vocal and very active minority. These CEOs largely want to avoid controversy. They fear controversy coming from their left. Well, maybe they should fear it coming from their right as well. If they're worried about a small number of online activists condemning them if they don't speak out on things like the Equality Act or that Georgia election law, maybe they should fear an online conservative outpouring of criticism if they do. If they're worried about all of the young, woke, spoiled kids they have working in their company demanding it, maybe they should hear from the conservatives they have in their company. So there are things that we can do to influence the behavior of these corporations and tell the CEOs that there's a price to pay for sticking their nose where it doesn't belong and trying to act as a kind of alternative woke corporate government when they should be sticking to things like flying their airplanes and selling sugary beverages.
It's funny. There was an organization a few weeks ago that ran some hard-hitting ads against Delta and against Coca-Cola, attacking them for being hypocritical. Delta for working with China and requiring a photo ID to get on the phone or get on the plane, but then also criticizing Coca-Cola for the childhood obesity epidemic. And one thing I noticed is the Human Rights Campaign sent out a letter from a bunch of corporate CEOs basically attacking the bills that passed, like in Arkansas and West Virginia. And there were two companies that were not on that list that I was shocked about: Coca-Cola and Delta. So I think you're exactly right. I think that we need to APP. I know that we've got some plans in the works to hold these corporations accountable for attacking our families, but our people really do need to speak out because they do respond to it. But there's a whole list of corporations we're going to be going after in the coming weeks.
And some of this too, it reminds me of a phenomenon I see in Washington. You get these politicians from all across the country, and they end up spending too much time around Washington insiders, whether it's their staff or reporters or lobbyists or what have you, and they start to see the world through their eyes rather than see the world through the eyes of the people they serve at home. I think the same thing can happen to these CEOs. Look, these CEOs are not out in farm country for the most part. They're sitting in major metropolitan areas like Atlanta Therefore, they're surrounded by a bunch of urban liberals, most of whom are coming straight out of the Ivy League with their fancy MBAs, and they're around those people all the time. So they credit to them a much larger share of their workforce than they actually have. I mean, again, Delta CEO should go out and speak to the gate agents and the baggage handlers and the flight attendants and the mechanics and the pilots working for him all around the country if he wants to get a sense of where his workforce really is.
I just want to say, I love that you're focusing on the workforce instead of only the shareholders. I think that I think we put too much emphasis on, these activist shareholders that, the ESG, all of that stuff, and not enough on the workers. You're exactly right. The workers are so much more important for a company, or at least equally as important as the people investing in it. So.
And that's also why, I mean, I know some conservatives say that, well, let's boycott Delta, let's boycott Coca-Cola, what have you. But when I think about that, I think about all those thousands of workers who do agree with us, who do support, the kind of issues that I champion in the Senate, or what the American Principles Project does from the outside. And I don't want to do anything to hurt them, hurt their livelihood, hurt their family. I just wish that their CEOs would take into account their views, as opposed to just taking into account the young woke liberals working in their glittering skyscraper offices downtown Atlanta or New York or Chicago or wherever some of these big corporations are headquartered.
Yep. One of the other questions that kept coming up, Senator, is the issue of critical race theory. And this is something, it's not just in these corporations in the work training programs that they have. This is now in our schools. And people kept pointing out that, there's teachings like little kids that the content of their character is determined by the color of their skin. I mean, it's the exact opposite of Martin Luther King Jr. I'm wondering if you can, you've actually introduced legislation. Can you talk about how we can fight back against CRT and talk about your legislation, please?
Yeah, so I've introduced legislation that would defund federal grants from teaching things like the 1619 Project, which is critical race theory put in action by charlatans at the New York Times. I've got legislation coming down the pike that'll do the same thing to the federal government more broadly, to make sure that we're not indoctrinating federal employees, requiring them to sit through crazy diversity training workshops in which they're required to condemn other races or condemn their own race. I've got a whistleblower project along with Congressman Dan Crenshaw with the military that's really exposed how rapidly the military has kind of bought into critical race theory, at least at the flag officer level of generals and admirals, seeing which way the political wind is blowing with the Biden administration. And critical race theory is now kind of working its way through our service academy and professional military schools, even down to frontline unit training. All of this needs to be stopped. I mean, you cited at the outset Martin Luther King's famous "I Have a Dream" speech. I would encourage all of you, if you haven't done it lately, go back and read that speech. It's not very long. It's only about 15 or 20 minutes long when he spoke. And it is the farthest thing from critical race theory that you can imagine. It explicitly and repeatedly appeals to the Declaration of Independence and appeals to the founding principles of our country, recognizing that we haven't always lived up to them in practice, but that we're continually striving to do so. And that Martin Luther King Jr. saw the work of the civil rights movement, not as a repudiation of America and our founding, but as the full realization of the promise of America, which is the exact opposite of critical race theory, which explicitly condemns America for being systematically, inherently, and irredeemably racist, and treats races as inherently oppressive or privileged or inherently victimized or oppressed. I can't tell you how many people, when I travel the state of Arkansas or just travel around the country and making connections in airplanes, speak to me about this issue and how concerned they are. And it comes from some unexpected places as well. I was shopping for groceries in Little Rock a few weeks ago, and a Black woman and I passed an aisle, and she kind of gave me the side eye, the way I'm used to when people kind of recognize me but aren't sure who I am. And then we go up the next aisle, and she stops me and she says, "I'm sorry, you Senator Cotton?" I said, "Yes, ma'am. I am guilty as charged." And she said, I just want to thank you for what you've been saying in Washington and representing us. I believe in conservative family values. And I'm sick and tired of people thinking I don't just because I'm Black. And that's an important reminder that we should always respect each other as individuals, and we should look past outward differences. And we should look at, as Dr. King said, the content of the character.
Exactly. And there's something very odd about the critical race theory stuff, right? They use really it really is racist at its heart. Like this is something that's across the left. They have a real it's almost like we're still dealing with the Confederate mentality, right? Of where there are inferior races and there are people with privilege or supremacy. And it's like you look at them and how they talk about election integrity reform, right? You talk about voter ID. They will, like a white, rich, affluent white people will tell you that, people of color and minorities and Black people, they really struggle to be able to figure out how to get a photo ID. I mean, like the most insulting and I mean really racist stuff ever. Do you have any comment on that? Like, this really, it feels like we won the Civil War, but we're still dealing with the remnants of the bad guys. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Well, a buzzword in these left-wing circles is anti-racist. I think one of the main screeds published by one of the main apostles of critical race theory is entitled "How to Be an Anti-Racist." In fact, it's so dedicated to being an anti-racist, it is racist in its intent and in fact, as you say, explicitly saying that some races are privileged and oppressive, or some races are oppressed and victimized, and that the only way to remedy past discrimination is present discrimination on the basis of race. And this is not some abstract academic debate. It would be bad enough if that were the case, but who cares what a bunch of professors in seminar rooms are saying when no one's listening, to include their students. It is an actual live public controversy. I mean, the Democratic Congress passed legislation in March that explicitly conditioned federal programs and benefits, real money in the billions of dollars, on the color of American skin. Now, fortunately, those programs have been enjoined by courts. I suspect we may find future Supreme Court rulings around the corner on them if the Biden administration doesn't relent. But Congress is taking action, just like the Biden administration is taking action to actually condition government benefits on the color of one's skin. That's a real concrete, tangible action that is a result of so-called critical race theory.
Senator, we've got a little bit more time left. I know that you're busy, so let me. I almost want to do a coin flip between these last two questions. I'll leave it to you. Okay, there's two questions. You can figure. Maybe you slice them and dice them in half, or just pick one or the other. The first one is, what are the worst aspects of the Biden agenda in your mind, and what are the Republicans that you're working with doing to fight back against that? And then two, do you believe the pandemic response over the past year has hurt the American family, and if so, how?
So I think some of the issues we've discussed are the worst parts of the Biden administration. Look, I don't want the Biden administration to raise taxes on Americans. I don't want them to hurt our economic recovery. But if they do raise taxes, well, we can cut your taxes when we get back in office. There's lots of things that we can do when we take back power in the future, which I hope won't be too very far away. But if we allow Joe Biden and the Democratic Party to indoctrinate an entire generation of our kids earlier in these radical race and gender theories, and especially indoctrinate them to hate America, what does it matter if we win a couple elections over the next few election cycles? So in some ways, I think these are the most important issues facing our country, to ensure that we're teaching the next generation of Americans to be patriotic citizens who love our country. Doesn't mean you have to be totally ignorant of times when we've fallen short of our country's noble ideals. You can be objective about our history. There's a difference between being objective about America and being neutral or even negative towards America. And that's what so many of these liberals and Democrats want to do. I think that, and on the second question, Terry, I think the effects of the pandemic have been mixed. I know a lot of families, especially families with college-age kids or young adults, who actually welcome the time to be together and to be a little bit less focused on work and school and to reconnect. And I know families who had estranged members who were able to reconnect and establish deeper bonds last year. I think for some families as well, it's going to show them what really matters is family. And yes, you have to make a living, put food on the table and a roof over your head. But we work for our family. We don't have a family so we can work. Obviously, it's put strains on a lot of families as well, whether families have lost loved ones or have people who are still dealing with the effects of the coronavirus, lost jobs, and therefore didn't have their livelihood. But I hope that one thing that we will take away over the last year and a half is that family really should be at the center of our life, and that policymakers in Washington and our state capitals need to keep family first and foremost in the center of their thoughts as well.
No, I think that's great. And I want to reiterate I think you're right. There was some silver lining here with the pandemic response, especially with my family. It really allowed my wife and I to dig in because of all the distance learning stuff. We had to help our kids with their schooling, and we were exposed to a lot of the garbage and baloney that gets done in our schools. We ended up, because of the distance learning and all of that, we decided to homeschool last year. And then this year, there's no way we're sending our kids back to public school. It's just not that great. All right, Senator, we're about out of time. I'm going to turn it back to you for 2 minutes or 2 or 3 minutes of closing, and just really appreciate you joining us and appreciate all the work that you're doing. I mean, again, guys, I will, all of our members, I'm going to send you out some of the best clips from Senator Cotton. They are amazing and enjoyable. They're fun to watch too. But Senator, take it away.
Well, thanks again, Terry, for having me. And thanks very much for the work of the American Principles Project, and especially this new Big Family Initiative. I know, especially over the last several months, it can feel like we're in a small and beleaguered minority. I just want to reassure all of you that I don't think you are in a small minority. In fact, I think you're in a pretty sizable majority. Now, unfortunately, the left in America commands a lot of the high citadels of opinion making and influence. The media, college campuses, unfortunately, and increasingly K through 12 education, Hollywood, big tech, the unelected parts of our government. But again, I just cannot stress how much I hear as I travel around the state of Arkansas, travel around the country, from normal Americans from all walks of life who share our beliefs. Oftentimes they feel too much pressure to speak out about them. They're worried about their place in their workforce. They're worried about losing their spot in college or their kid's spot in college. They're worried about their business being boycotted, being attacked on social media. But I'm very, very confident that we represent a large majority of Americans. And if we have the courage to defend our families and really just express basic common sense, that we'll be successful not only in settings like schools, but also successful ultimately at the ballot box as well.
Very good. I think you're exactly right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Senator. Senator, we will be continuing to pay attention to your work, and who knows, maybe we'll be able to get you on here again in the coming months to discuss any other crazy stuff that the Democrats do in that time.
It'd be a target-rich environment.
That's right. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.